Hello and welcome to Pulse of Culture here on TVP World. I'm Salia Jastrzębska. It's a seemingly anonymous place with no sign marking the entrance. It has just 60 square meters of floor space, yet twice a week people are queuing up to get in. Warsaw's Queer Museum, which recently opened its door in the Polish capital, is only the 5th museum of its kind in the world. Theatre artist, playwright and a member of the Queer Museum's Program Council, Szymon Adamczak joins me to tell us more about this very unique place. Hello and welcome, delighted to have you with us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, Queer Museum is the 3rd of its kind in Europe and the 5th, I believe, in the world. So why was it created now, and sort of where does the need to create it stems from?
So, on the one hand, the museum is like a long-standing effort to transform the already existing archive that has been gathered in the back room of Lambda Warsaw, which is an NGO supporting the LGBTQ plus advocacy. So, for the almost 30 years, the museum, the archive has been, put together. So there was, on the one hand, the room as well, a need to transform it into a larger space. On the other hand, we felt, because I'm part of like a larger body of a program council, we felt also this is the right moment in terms of shifting also political power after the 2023. So we also felt that there's a breath of fresh air also for us as a community to create a new form, right? So, because like for the past under the previous government, we kind of been facing the humanization of LGBTQ plus people in Poland. So actually a place that is strictly dedicated to celebrating queer culture, achievements, historiography, a place also where people can learn and that can promote equality and social cohesion, have felt important to come up.
Right. The space is very small. However, the museum is quite popular, right? So who is your target audience?
I mean, we believe, first and most of all, to invite people who are, self-identifying as LGBTQ people in Warsaw and Poland, but also we actively look for people living in Warsaw to come up, the neighbors as well, who live in the center. Of course, some of the audiences are also like international visitors and people interested in Poland. And the museum's role, I believe, or this is what we start to notice, is also changing the kind of outlook that Poland may have in the world, especially after past years, right? Because like people come to the city of Warsaw and see a progressive initiative that comprehensively speaks about experiences of people in Poland. So there are of course a couple of audiences, but we don't necessarily limit it, right, to just queer identifying people, but we welcome everyone to come.
Of course, and the main exhibit is linear, right? It's centered on a timeline. So what were some of the most significant events for the queer community here in Poland? And the exhibit starts in the 16th century already, so it's quite an extensive time period, right?
Yeah, so the curatorial team that has worked for almost 16 months to put it together have decided to also create this timeline as the permanent exhibition, kind of a cornerstone that we can all depart from, because it's like impossible, right, to convey such a multi-century history just in one room, indeed. So there's a selection needed. So a couple of objects that I find very significant. On the one hand, we have a number of things that are connected to legislative history. So, for example, there is a Codex Carolinum from 16th century that has been also, working in the Polish kingdom that has been translated from Latin to Polish, and that's already where history is quite interesting, that the Polish translation omitted women, meaning that this code was penalizing homosexual acts, was prohibiting them, but in Polish translation was prohibiting male acts and forgot women. Other important objects that we have are, for example, maybe I would say of the newest objects that we have, because it's in the center, it's a kind of a centerpiece of the exhibition right now. So just upon the news that the museum will open, we have received a beautiful gift, which is a gay zine from the 1956 from Wrocław, which is now, as we believe, the oldest gay publication as we know of in Poland. Earlier we thought that we have only things from the 80s, so this changes kind of our outlook on the queer history in this regard. We have also a number of important historically objects, like I think one that I kind of find very moving. There is a list of Stefan Chmielewski, who was supporting his lover's mom, who was in the Warsaw's ghetto. And after the war, he was asked to write down names of people that he had helped to save, lives he had saved. So it's also an interesting example of someone who was queer, and queer underground networks that have been supportive during the Second World War to Jewish population, which is one of the kind of heroes that maybe is not popular or not known for the wider public, but it's important to also mark a story like that. But also we have very much queer artifacts, right? Or like queer history-related artifacts. One of my favorite, significant, is also the nomination of Anna Grodzka to be a parliament member. For let's say, LGBTQ history, it's a huge achievement, right? So we exhibit as well this nomination.
Right, absolutely. This is indeed important. I wanted to take a closer look at the communist times, right? I mean, because clearly queer community was very much underground during that time, right? And there was some, so could you please tell me a little bit more about that time? And also the last chapter, if we look at the timeline, right, in the museum is entitled Breakthrough, right? And I believe it starts in 1990. So was it really a breakthrough, if you could?
Well, definitely, like, so the narrative accounts also for the time after the war, in the Stalinist period, that has been the harshest, of course. So like many people who could not speak about their experiences of the war and also of their queerness. And after '68, we notice more and more things also, especially in the culture, and in the '80s also, even official culture. We have an example of a poster from Teatr Polski w Poznaniu, Polish Theatre in Poznań, that exhibited, like staged The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer just 2 years after the American premiere. And it's exactly in the time in the 80s where actually speaking of AIDS hasn't been so public, which also there is this kind of different dynamics in Polish culture. But the 80s have been super significant also to the queer movements of Poland, and also we see the museum as a continuity of these efforts. So a number of activists, including Ryszard Kisiel in Gdańsk or Andrzej Selerowicz in Vienna, have been responsible or have undertaken the task of informing also their audiences, their friends, about the epidemic, and colporting the news from the West about the dangers of HIV. And this is how many of the kind of underground zines started to pop. And as well, this is the time of the Hyacinth action, right? So like the mass surveillance action of the military that was trying, on the one hand, officially was trying to say that it's in relation to the AIDS pandemic, but it's also AIDS epidemic, but it's also in the connection to the infiltration of the movements. So in a way, the 90s as a breakthrough is also like the shift or the change of the systems, right? That like allows, I don't know, press to appear. It's interesting that the Warsaw homosexual movement, which was the first kind of initiative to legalize LGBTQ activism, has not been accepted by the Communist Party leadership, but it has been registered just after in the early 90s, which and later on led to the co-creation of the Lambda groups, which gives birth to Lambda as well. So it is also the moment when things from the West, right, start to appear in our country, which also creates this kind of question: what kind of, I don't know, identities are going to come up, and what are the kind of troubles of Polish LGBTQ community maybe will become more visible than they were in the 80s.
Right, of course. And aside from being on the board of the museum, you're also a theatre artist, right? And I wanted to ask you about one of your projects, namely Bob Mellers and the investigation into his death, because he was a British gay rights activist, right, living in Poland in the 1990s, so after the transformation. And he was killed, right? He was found murdered in his apartment, and till this day we don't know what really happened to him. So why is this story important? Why are you conducting this investigation, and what does it say about the Polish society?
Yes, so the project about Bob Mellers, I call it Goodbye to Discretion. So I find it a fascinating account of a transnational movement, and so the storytelling also kind of allows me also to connect or to tap Polish context of the 90s with historical achievements of, Black Panthers in the US, the Gay Liberation Front in the UK, which Bob was co-founded. And I was also very curious, like, how did it happen then that, a co-founder of Gay Liberation Front in the 70s UK founds himself in Warsaw in 1991 and then gets murdered 5 years later? There's a couple, of course, the answer could be quite complex, but Bob has been interested in the work of a trans philosopher in the UK, who was of Hungarian origin, and he also saw a chance in the late 80s of kind of reporting and kind of trying to understand Eastern Europe, that the access towards which was quite limited. So he was asking critical questions that, like, with changes after Iron Curtain, what will happen? What has West offered to the East, and what has East offered to the West? So Bob hoped to tell about Poland and about Polish queerness, and also he was very interested in the lives of trans people as well, and people from, let's say, impoverished people. So the documentation that I have accrued speaks of this 5-year period, which is quite. I haven't read this kind of perspective written by Polish writer or Polish activist. It takes somebody from the outside to kind of inform us about what changes. So he was exploring this curious moment. He was not necessarily engaged in activism in Poland, although he has met people. He was also, he became English teacher. He was teaching English. One of my favorite parts is that he was helping to prepare the actors of a famous musical Metro,
right,
to come to Broadway. And he was found dead in his flat, indeed. And that's also maybe because of his proclivities. As far as I know, the death was a brutal murder, but by someone he had known before. But who was this person, what kind of charges were made, if the person was persecuted, this I don't know, and I hope to learn.
But you'll hopefully find out and be able to tell us the story. But let me ask you about your own story, because you came back to Poland from the Netherlands, you used to live in Amsterdam. So what made you do so? Do you think that, Poland perhaps has become this more open-minded place? What was the reason for your comeback?
Well, of course, it's a personal and complex issue. I have been there 8 years. I went to the Netherlands to study. So I did my master's and I stayed there out of love. But of course, like, I've realized in the recent years that there's this kind of, it feels like there's a new opening, and also like I feel that I'm kind of my period of learning and also kind of being engaged in research in relation to HIV and also queer lives, that like maybe what's more important for me as a Polish citizen is to do the work that I carry in my homeland and my motherland. So I feel that's also the reason. And I must say also being able to co-create with others such an incredible initiative as Queer Museum is also another reason to be here.
You have an important mission to accomplish here. Thank you so much. Szymon Adamczak, thank you. Much appreciated. And thank you for watching Pulse of Culture. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World, of course.